Welcome to Inspired Living with Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector. Every Wednesday, Marc, along with his special guests, will explore thought-provoking topics and ideas that promote creativity, self-help, healing, happiness, and well-being to inspire you on your spiritual journey. Each week, Marc will discuss different paths to achieving a more spiritual, balanced, happy, and healthy lifestyle. Topics will elevate consciousness and range from metaphysics to the human and social experience and all things spiritual. Welcome to an inspired community that offers support, encouragement, and new ways of thinking. Marc is a tested, certified, and professional spiritual medium, metaphysical teacher, healer, and spiritual advisor with a spiritual practice based in Seattle, Washington. You are the inspired and the inspiration.
Who is more humble? The scientist who looks at the universe with an open mind and accepts whatever the universe has to teach us? Or somebody who says everything in this book must be considered the literal truth and never mind the fallibility of all the human beings involved? That's from the great late Carl Sagan, who reminds us that this universe is vast. There's so much that we are here to learn, and we are just touching the surface of whatever is out there. The truth is out there. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be in this beautiful, transformative, healing planet of ours. This is Inspired Living Radio. I am your host, Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector, here on the wonderful OMTimes Radio Network, where we have been, this has been our home for 6 seasons now, as we explore and discover all the different things that are out there in our world. I was just on our Facebook page doing a Facebook Live and was just kind of reminiscing of all the things that we've covered over the years, over the last 6 seasons of Inspired Living Radio. And we are here every Wisdom Wednesday, whether it's a live show or an encore show at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, here on the OMTimes Radio Network live. You can also go over to marclainhart.com, where I have the global player sitting, a new section on my page. It is all Inspired Living Radio with the global player. And you click on that global player, and you can listen to it, this live show, this live broadcast, anywhere around the planet. No username, no password, no memberships. It's really quite slick. And you can listen in. And if you don't catch today's live show, the show is then goes over to a podcast format, and we're on several channels now. Inspired Living Radio is streaming through Spotify, Google Podcasts. You can find us over on YouTube and iTunes. We're now streaming through Castbox and SoundCloud. You can also go, if you have a specific channel that you follow for podcasts, because I know there's a lot of podcasts out there, but we want to be on your podcast playlist, favorites playlist. Podcast Addict, Podchaser, Deezer, Spreaker, Joe Savion, and of course OMTimes Radio Archives and marclainhart.com always have the all the shows that we've done over the last 6 seasons. So I hope you're having a good day wherever you may find yourself in this crazy, chaotic, fast-paced world of ours. Like I said, we've covered many topics over the years. Today we're going to be talking about what I call the 4 S's: science, spiritualism, synergy, and skepticism, and how those all play together, because those are completely 4 different topics, but they actually really are. I always say that science and spirituality are really 2 sides of the same coin, and we're going to be talking about that. So, it's just, like I said, one of the many topics that we've covered. We've covered everything from metaphysics, movies, meditations, medicine, mediumship, manifesting, marketing, mountaineering, macroevolution, mathematics and numerology, masterminding, mental health, materialism, marriage, what this thing we call mankind and our journey that we find ourselves on, money, modernism, Mother Earth. I mean, there's just so many topics that we try to cover in an episode of Inspired Living Radio. But our main point and our main focus is to inspire, to encourage, to motivate. And I always like to say, dare to dream, dare to explore, dare to live and discover that diamond within, because we're all prospectors trying to find that diamond. And remember, without pressure, there is no diamond. So we feel the pressures of life. And today we're going to be talking about again, science, spiritualism, synergy, and skepticism. So what I want to start with first is the topic. We'll kind of break the show down today into 4 categories. And today I want to talk about science. And the reason I want to talk about science is because we've literally seen history in the making. This last weekend, Sir Richard Branson went to space with Virgin Galactic, and he blasted out of what we're now calling Spaceport America. If you have not heard of it, it is literally a $200 million investment down in New Mexico. And he blasted out with 6 other people, went to the edge of space, which NASA and the FAA would say is about 50 to 58 miles is the edge of space. And it was just awesome to watch. But what people didn't realize at the time in history making is that is the most people we've ever had in space. And you're thinking, well, Mark, how is that? Well, because we have 6 astronauts right now that are currently on the International Space Station that's orbiting around the planet. So you have 6 people on the space station, 6 people that went up to the edge of space and floated around for 4 minutes and then glided back down to Spaceport America. And then you also have 3 astronauts on the Chinese International Space Station. So with that, that would be what? 6 plus 6 is 12, 13, 14, 15. I guess it would be 15 people that were in space. That's the most people we've ever had in space at one time. So I find that to be very historical, very eye-opening as we go through what I've long predicted are roaring 20s where they're going to have great transformations, great insight, great awareness, great awakening. Some of our biggest questions will start to be answered. But with the science approach, like I said, most people, think that science and spirituality are two opposite or opposing fields. And I can see why that is. With my journey coming from a background of being in the Coast Guard for several years, being a professional firefighter, EMT, being a certified healthcare provider today, I really did a lot of work in my career on the logical mindset, which is the left brain hemisphere that Einstein talked about. So reasoning, logic, critical thinking, not really thinking about, death or dying or what lies beyond death. And, I was also raised in a religion that was very dogma-based, you had to do this, you had to believe this, and if you didn't, then you weren't really a member. So I can see why most people think that science and spirituality are totally opposite or opposing fields of studies. But like I said, from my experiences, both in, I know a lot of scripture. I always like to say I know my scripture, but I'm not a preacher. But also my work in this world, in the physicality of science, and always trying to use the scientific method and trying to understand through the scientific method of, what paranormal events are, what is psychic and mediumship, what is intuition. And I found that they really are two sides of the same coin. So the first category of science to me, I always say that the aim of science is to uncover the deepest spiritual truths. And the aim of our spiritualism is the search for the cause behind what we call scientific fact or the scientific method. Physical scientists have chosen science as their field, just like when, if you're listening to the show, maybe there's a chosen field that you've chosen: medicine, law, science. For me, it's spirituality with a little blending of that science aspect, that scientific method as well. And you'll find that if you study people over the past, or as like I like to say, I'm a student of history and I observe a lot. You'll find that the scientists in the physical scientific realms are not much different from the spiritual scientists who spent time engaged in spiritual research. It's always about the research, and there's several, things I'm going to talk about in the show. Everything from the SPR to the SNU to the Woodbridge Institute and a few others, the Omega Institute, the Berkeley Psychic Institute, places that I've actually studied, places that I've gone in this world to understand my journey, especially when my journey started to unfold through what I call TNT, trauma and tragedy, that really changed my paradigm and my belief systems and even my brain to rewire, which we call neuroplasticity, which we've had past shows on with amazing guests from Stanford, Harvard, MIT over the seasons talking about, consciousness and spiritualism. But, they're both seeking, whether it's the physical science or the spiritual science, they're actually seeking, like myself as a prospector, answers to the same question. It's just in different ways. And they are both, in a search or prospecting to find what we call the hidden laws of nature, the higher power that created everything. God, what is God? Who is God? Is God a person? And use those discoveries to better the lives of others. And we can find that through history past. The physical science, try to prove, what God is, because us as humans, we like to put a label or a definition to something that we don't understand. And sometimes when we don't understand something as humans in a scientific exploration or a scientific study, whether it's paranormal or in the physical world, things that we don't understand can lead us to fear. It can lead us to what we've seen in past Hollywood movies, or how we were raised, or what religion we were brought up into. But it really is, what are these hidden laws of nature that we're all trying to find? And again, the physical science are trying to prove God to themselves through the outer eyes and ears, your external senses, as you like to say: smell it, taste it, touch it, hear it, see it. Those are the known 5 physical senses that we would all be in agree upon, as that's agreeable fact as science today. But the spiritual scientist, and I would put myself in the combination of both, but I also really go deep in my spiritual studies and my spiritual development and my spiritual teachings of trying to understand and observe what God is through what I call my inner eye, or my inner ear, or the clairvoyance, clairsentience, the ability to see in your mind, the clairvoyance, which are images or pictures from the spirit world, or to actually hear, which we call clairaudience. It's an actual voice without it actually hitting the eardrum. Clairsentience, which is using the largest organ of the body, which is your skin. So it's just, like I said, it's really, two sides of the same coin, and it's really just two ways of trying to get, to the same conclusion, just in how you go about that. So that's what we're going to talk about in the first section of science, and then we'll go to break, and we'll come back, and we'll continue with the science, but we're also going to blend into the spiritualism and also talk about the synergy of what takes place. Many of you know who Albert Einstein is. I love the story and the journey of Albert Einstein, because he was not of an academic mindset. He was not raised in academia. He did not come from a family that was, well-to-do or rich or had influence or, had connections. He actually was a patent clerk, working on patents in a patent office, and he started to write his papers on theory of relativity and some very deep thought papers of consciousness, and it really ruffled feathers in academia. And we know Albert Einstein today. If you don't know his journey, I always say, go learn it, go look it up, go research it. We have a lot of information at our fingertips. And one of the quotes that I love from Albert Einstein that really helped me with this balance between the scientific mind and the spiritual mind, the left brain, the right brain, is: the intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. So what he's talking about is the intuitive mind is on the right hemisphere. That's where our creativity comes from. That's where our imagination comes from. And then the rational mind is the left hemisphere, critical thinking, logic. And so what he's saying is the intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. And I really do believe that with society today, with all the external distractions, all the connections to something other than yourself, whether it's through media, through social media, news, your latest app on your smartphone, whatever it may be, we have disconnected. And I think that's why we see more chaos and more upheaval and more divide than we ever have in modern times. And so we've forgotten to go inside and to really tune in to that inner voice and to that inner ear. As all of us are scientists, we're all asking big questions in life, and what is the secret of life, and how long are we going to be here? One of the things I always like to say in my development is sit still and the journey unfolds. As a professional psychic, I get people that come to me all the time asking me, Mark, what's my future? And I always say the best part about your future is it comes one day at a time. And have you really thought about what you want to do today and plant the seeds in your garden for the garden you want in your future? And a lot of them say no. They don't take the time to disconnect so they can connect to something bigger than themselves. And then I always remind them, you could go to 100 different psychics and 100 different mediums, and you may get 100 different answers. So it's always important to go within. And if you sit still, just take some time, whether you're in the shower or just waking up in bed, just take a second just to sit still and listen and connect to your higher self, that intuitive mind, that intuitive gift that Einstein talks about. And that's part of your scientific journey of being a spiritual scientist, to understand what this journey is all about in our search for answers. Again, we look to science today, which, it's whether it's taking Sir Richard Branson to the edge of space, that's based on science and technology, or whether it's trying to connect to a loved one who's passed over from this horrible COVID-19 pandemic, which I have already started to do. I've already seen people coming from the spiritual world to my doorstep to have a conversation with somebody that's still here in the physical world. And when I say that out loud, even in my mind, my analytical ego mind goes, okay, that just sounds weird. It does, but it is reality because they bring through evidence and intelligence and love and healing for the people that search me out to have an intuitive consultation, whether it's psychic and or mediumship. And is it God? I don't know, but I know that there is something other than ourselves beyond. When this heart stops beating, the energy in the heart goes on. That's what I know the science teaches us, and that's what the laws of physics teach us. So when we come back from our first break, we're going to pick this up with more science, UAPs, UFOs, talk about more spiritualism, what synergy is, what the scientific method is. I'm going to talk about mass thought and phase transition, and then, of course, skepticism, because we live in a very skeptical world. So we're going to go to our first break here. Oh, we got about 30 seconds. Oh, no, there we go. Well, let's go to our first break. We'll be back here in 2 minutes. This is Inspired Living Radio, where we like to say, you are the inspired in the inspiration.
The future of Internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
Listeners, we hope you're enjoying the shows here on OMTimes Radio. Marc Lainhart here, and host of Inspired Living Radio. And I'd like to invite you to my morning show of inspiration, encouragement, healing, motivations, transformations, and discovering that diamond within. Metaphysical Mocha Mondays, every Monday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, over on the Intuitive Prospector Facebook page and my YouTube channel, Soul Adventures. Dare to dream, dare to explore, dare to live, and discover that diamond within.
COVID-19, brought to you by CDC and the Ad Council.
Do you feel like your emotions are all over the place? That's normal during this abnormal time. There are a number of ways to cope. Maintain a healthy routine, get enough sleep, eat nutritious food, and exercise at least 30 minutes each day. Schedule some time to talk with a friend or family member. And remember, you can always take a few deep breaths to feel more centered.
Find more self-care and coping tips at coping-19.org.
And welcome back to Inspired Living Radio. Your host, Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector, talking today's show on science, spirituality, synergy, and skepticism. If you do have a question later in the show, in the second half of the show, we will open up the phone lines. That number to call is 202-570-7057. That is the OMTimes radio call-in line, 202-570-7057. You can also go to our social media pages of Facebook. Just look for the public page, Inspired Living Radio, and join the global consciousness of inspired listeners all around the planet. You can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter under Inspired For Us. That is the number 4, Inspired For Us. And with that, let's jump right back into where we left off, which we talked about science and using scientific method. And what I love about, different gurus or teachers from around the planet that I've been following over the years, the Dalai Lama talked about this specifically, that the universe is a single atom, and it's the convergence of science and spirituality. So think about that just for a second. The universe is a single atom, and that convergence is of science and spirituality. And like I said, I do believe that they are both over, history, or, depending on what narrative or, story you're looking at. There is a lot of strife when it comes to religion, man-based religion and spiritualism. But I really do think that they are, two sides of the same coin, and they're just, engaged in research in different pathways to try to come to some of the hidden laws of nature, and what is God and what happens after we die. And within all human beings, we have some sort of desire to prove the existence of a force that brought us into creation. I think that's why Star Wars resonates to this day. It's a billion-dollar industry that, Disney obviously saw the wealth and the future of that and picked that up from George Lucas. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. It's funny because people say, Mark, based on eternity, based on, your being in this time is just not even a pinpoint if you measure out eternity. And people say, why do you think you came to this time on the planet? I always say it's because Star Wars was made, and I got to see the Star Wars universe and the Force Awakens and to feel the Force. And so, but we all have this desire to have some sort of proof. That's the ego mind. That's the logical mind. That's us as humans, as explorers, as prospectors. As we move into this roaring 20s that started us out with a pandemic, and it is now opening up, based on where we're at. There's, COVID's going to be with us until there's a cure, just like any other virus. There's really not a lot of cures to viruses out there, but it's how you mitigate and how you, serpentine, COVID-19 without a cure, just like we have done for AIDS, just like we did for polio through vaccinations. And, I know there's a big debate right now on vaccinations versus unvaccinated, but just follow the science, follow the data, follow, what, vaccination versus unvaccinations look like. It's free will and choice as well, which is part of that spiritual pathway. But, in every heart lies the desire to have proof that there is a God and a soul, or some part of God, some sort of creation. In my journey, I've done thousands of readings, and I've worked with people from full-on atheists that believe that once we die, that's it, that we just go into the ground and that's, game over. I've worked with people that, like myself, that tend to be more agnostic, that want that proof of what God is, what that paranormal event is, what is the difference between a ghost and a spirit. And then there's full believers that believe in the magic, and that's magic with a K, not with a C. So it's, we all have different choices, but at the end, I think I'd be pretty disappointed if we just, ended and just went in the ground and that was it. Because I don't think that we would have the emotions that we have if that was the case. Empathy, compassion, love. A soul is, part of the measurement on a scientific method is, how do you measure what a soul is? And that's based on empathy. That's why they say animals are, we have to treat animals with respect and treat our planet with respect, because everything is alive. And, things that show empathy and care and kindness and love is qualities in a scientific method of what a soul is. And if that was just to end, I'd be pretty disappointed and sad. But I don't think, and I definitely know that there's something of after-death communications, because I wouldn't be in business doing readings with people all around the world if there wasn't something to this. And that's that logical mind speaking from the physical scientist in me. But, look deep inside yourself. That's where that magic with the K that I'm talking about of intelligence is revealed. Sit still and the journey unfolds as we move into the spiritual category. But science is going to be a big part of that as we move forward, as we start to unlock doors. Like I said, we've got Spaceport America in New Mexico. We have Starbase, which is Elon Musk's Starship base. It's literally called Starbase, like in Star Trek, that is down in Boca Chica, Texas. We have Space Force, which is literally a branch of the service that joins our amazing military soldiers, both active duty, retired, those serving currently, whether it's Army, Marines, Air Force, Coast Guard, and now Space Force. And thank you to all the veterans out there for all that you've done, all that you've sacrificed. I always just kind of keep an eye on our veterans. And, but we have a Space Force now. So we're literally moving into that next frontier, between Spaceport, Starbase, and I know Jeff Bezos here in Seattle, the owner of Amazon, is about to launch into space on Blue Origin. And he's taken a couple people with him. So we're seeing space exploration. That is our next industrial revolution. Whether you want to believe that or not, you don't have to believe me, but I've been talking about, space exploration and space capitalization as we move to start mining asteroids, using science to actually have better technologies for, going to Mars and going to the moon. We're going to set up a moon base. That's going to be really cool to watch, just so you know. On my Facebook page, on the Intuitive Prospector page today, I talked about, this is just kind of, food for thought and to think about this. But if a child is born on Mars and they come and visit Earth, technically we would have to classify them as an alien because they are technically born as a Martian. And that is some of the concepts, and that's some of the language, and that's some of the thought that we're going to be talking about, which is very interesting if you think about it, because we are going to the moon. We are going to have space tourism. We are going to have people that have the ability to go into outer space and break into new frontiers, which is going to lead us to the moon, which is going to lead us to Mars, which is going to lead us beyond. And at some point, there's going to be some sort of first contact. The Pentagon has come out with a disappointing 9-page report. You guys know that I follow this very closely. Full disclosure, Element 115, metamaterial, Area 51. But this 9-page report is an official documented Pentagon report. The government has never in 75 years admitted to something that they don't understand. And in this report, which is unclassified, remember, there's always a classified report out there as well, they're actually saying, yes, there are UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon, that we don't know what it is. And if we look deep inside, a lot of us would know that we can't be the only species in this universe. That's pretty arrogant and egotistical to think that we are the only species out there with intelligence and that we just, evolved from, pond scum to be what we are today. It doesn't make sense. That's where the trust and the belief come in. But we have Starbase now. We have Spaceport America. And think about where we're going to be in 100 years, talking about, science and spirituality. In the next 100 years, it's only been since 1903 that the Wright brothers in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, discovered flight. And when they discovered flight, think about this. It goes against all the laws of physics. You're actually taking off into the wind to create something under that has wings that lifts you up into the ability to fly. Now, that was in 1903. So think about all the pundits and critics of the time and the scientists of the time saying, no, there's no way. It goes against our laws of physics. And it wasn't until 1914 that the first commercial flight took place in Florida, and that was an actual water-based plane where it would land in the water with wings, and that was in 1914. And then, of course, as we progressed on, World War II, World War I, World War II, and to today. And in fact, even commercial travel when I was born in the 70s was known as tourist travel. It wasn't actually even classified as coach travel. So you had first class, business class, coach class, kind of like steerage on a ship, right? Like the Titanic. You had your first class, your business class, your coach steering, right? And there was in the back of the bus or the back of the ship. And it wasn't until the 70s that we actually started to coin tourism to actual coach class. And, during that time, flying was an honor. It was a privilege. You got wings. You got, you dressed up to fly. And, if you look at today's flying, and I've done a lot of travel in my time, it's just like riding an Airbus, really. And people don't even get dressed up anymore. People don't really, because that shows us that science and technology has improved over the years. And imagine what another 100 years of what that's going to look like as we emerge into the adventures of outer space and the moon and on to Mars and beyond, to infinity and beyond. So as we move into the spiritual conversation, one of the things that I like to do to try to find balance in this journey for what I do, what I've gone through, and sharing my experiences with you, and like I said, trying to balance the two sides of this difficult coin, science and spirituality. The scientific method to find God, the scientific how science and spirituality can work together. And I personally believe that they make a great partnership, because if you're engaged in science, you spend time in silence with yourself. You look for inspiration, which usually can lead you to answers that you're seeking, whether it's internally or externally. And it's, similarly, those interested in spirituality apply the scientific law of testing hypothesis. The only difference is it's in the laboratory of their own body and soul, and that's where they find the results. So you may be in a physical laboratory if you're in the physical science, and you may be in a laboratory of your mind and your own body, which is the spiritual science. So really, same coin, two different sides, but all related to, connecting and asking those bigger questions. So one of the things that I like to use in this balance, this burden, and this journey of spirituality and science is what I call the SMART TED technique. And it's 2 words. It's broken down. I love acronyms. I work in medicine as a certified healthcare provider. We use acronyms all the time. I do it in my teachings. I bring it to my development group. And it's a great way to try to remember all these different things that we're constantly bombarded with in a day. But it's literally the word SMART. And it's an acronym. And when I am either doing a paranormal investigation or something is just not feeling right in consciousness or my meditation, something comes up in my meditation, or even a reading, I look at SMART as an acronym for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. Because time is the only thing that, humans measure everything by time. We're the only species that does that. Time is a construct. And I've always been fascinated with time, where on the other side, time is irrelevant. Time is past, present, future, all happening together. So it's really hard to get your mind around those 2 concepts. But the SMART acronym of being specific, that helps my focus. It helps me to measure whether I'm feeling it and I see it in my clairvoyance or my clairsentience. Is it attainable? Perhaps not. Sometimes it's pseudoscience like love. You can't prove it, but you can't disprove it. Is it realistic? Well, that's based on, perception. It's based on perspective. It's based on your belief system. If you want to see the magic, you got to believe in some of the magic, and that's magic with a K. And then, of course, what is the time of all this? So I use SMART all the time to help me with my journey and my development and my readings in my intuitive consultations that I do. But then I also look at TED. And TED is just the acronym TED. Tell me, explain to me, describe to me. Because I'm always a learner, I'm always a student of history, and I'm always an observer. Because I believe that when you observe, that's how you can increase your perspective. And spirituality really, in the concept of spiritualism, is the ability to be flexible and to shift your perspective. Even Darwin goes back to this when he said, it's not the smartest that survive, and it's not the strongest that survive. It is those that are the most flexible in the ability to change and transform. That's where the true power lies, and I constantly believe that. So here's something to think about as we get into the spiritual conversation. What if consciousness is eternal, but all of our memories fade with the dissolution of the brain? Because again, we're storing here in physical matter, our brain, all our memories, all of our adventures, our soul adventures. And what if we live infinite lifetimes but are also always destined to recall nothing of them once they are over? Some talk about reincarnation. Almost every single religion around the world has a conversation, including the Bible. Christianity has concepts of reincarnation. But what if we live infinite lifetimes on a journey of infinity and eternity, but they're always destined to recall nothing of them once they are over? Some call that deja vu. Some say, I feel like I've seen this before. I've been here before. And I had that when I first went to London for the first time, which tells me I knew where I was going, but I'd never been to London in this lifetime back in 2009. And it was very uncomfortable. So that the only thing I could conclude from the scientific, whether it's the spiritual laboratory of my mind or the physical of reincarnation, of what we talk about in reincarnation, was I had been to England in a previous life. And I resonated with it because I knew where I was going, and it was really quite interesting, but also quite disturbing to the logical brain. So when we start to look deep inside ourselves, there is that magic spirit that is revealed to all of us. And the more we look, the deeper we go. I always like to say the more you're aware of the mystic, the more the mystic becomes aware of you. And when you realize that your conscious mind isn't always in control, we ask ourselves, where is this thought coming from, right? Is it coming from the gut? Is it coming from the heart? Is it coming from the brain? A lot of us are like, deep inside of us, there's this thing called the subconscious mind. And a lot of times I always say it's in your subconscious mind or your intuition, which is your spirit or your soul. And it's working to assist you, to help you with wisdom and knowledge and guidance and understanding, and sometimes answers to important questions that you have. But, from a scientific standpoint, we can't pinpoint where that subconscious mind in the human body really lies. We talk about the brain, we talk about the heart, they're connected. We talk about the pineal gland, which I could spend hours telling you about the pineal gland from a metaphysical teaching standpoint. But we don't know where that thought generates from. Where is its source? And that's always been kind of fascinating to me. We're in the incarnate body, which means physical, which means that our cells have come into a physical vibration, that we're actually vibrating in this frequency. And when we leave this body, what a spiritualist call from a spiritual standpoint, that's called discarnate, which means indestructible, really. It means, so you incarnate, you have this, this journey, and then you die and you transfer over, and we call that discarnate. So really your life, if you look at a headstone, I was born in 1972. And I have this little dash, and then I end whenever my date to discarnate back to, spirit. So my life is really just represented by a dash. So if you think about that, on a headstone somewhere, whether I won't be buried, I'll be actually cremated, but wherever that, memorial for me, wherever that lies, I haven't really thought about it, and a lot of people don't, but it's just something, it's just something to think about. So, on the spiritual pathways, I always go back to, what Einstein said. The scientist's religious feeling takes the form of a rapturous amazement at the harmony of natural law, which reveals an intelligence of such superiority that, compared with it, all the systematic thinking and acting of human beings is utterly insignificant reflection. So you have to go look that up to get the deeper meaning of what he was saying there. But it's pretty much just, again, those two sides of the same coin. And science without religion is lame, and religion without science is blind, as he would always say. So we're talking about a lot of things here in today's show. We're talking about science and how we're moving forward into our roaring 20s with all the great advancements in technology. We're touching on spiritualism and how those two combine and merge. And when we come back from our last break, we're going to talk about some pathways of prospecting for yourself. What is synergy that connects all of those two? And of course, we'll finish this show with the skeptic mindset, because I think we all have a little bit of skepticism in us, but that is actually quite healthy and mindful to have that skepticism. I always say life is short, question everything. So we'll be back here in 2 minutes in our last break here on Inspired Living Radio. Thanks for hanging out with us today. We'll be back here shortly.
The cutting edge of conscious radio. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Have you wondered how to change your love paradigm? The secret key is finding a love partnership, not just a regular connection. How do you find these? Through conscious relationships. Ascending Hearts Dating is a dating site for people like you that believes in second chances and a different type of spiritual connection. Try Ascending Hearts for free at ascendinghearts.com and change your love paradigm. Ascending Hearts, the premier dating community for the spiritually awake.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
One planet, 7.3 billion people, only one you. Life offers us many opportunities and learning experiences. Are you ready to explore and discover this beautiful planet, the life and energy all around us, the spiritual world, and what is unseen, along with your own personal soul adventure? Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector, is the spiritual connection you have been prospecting for. Internationally known as a tested and professional clairvoyant medium and spiritual advisor, Marc's work as a metaphysical teacher, medical instructor, radio show host, inspirational writer, and hiking guide are here to help you on a journey of self-discovery, healing, inspiration, education, and a whole lot of spiritual awesomeness. Dare to dream. Dare to explore. Dare to live. For more information on Marc's spiritual practice in Seattle, Washington, please visit marclainhart.com or internet search The Intuitive Prospector.
If I could be you,
and you could be me,
for just 1 hour,
If you could find a way
to get inside
each other's mind.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Welcome back to Inspired Living Radio. Today's show, science, spirituality, synergy, and skepticism, and talking about the relationship between both science and spirituality and being two sides of the same coin. And one of the things that I look at from history past is I always, Louis Pasteur, who was born in 1822, he was the French chemist and microbiologist who really left an impact on our both science and spirituality of what he did as a scientist. And I believe that Louis Pasteur not only worked in a physical lab, but he also had that laboratory of his mind. And his contributions, whether it was to science, technology, medicine, and I would even say spirituality, are nearly without precedent because he literally pioneered the study of molecular symmetry. He discovered the microorganisms that cause fermentation and disease. He originated the process of pasteurization, and he, saved the beer, wine, and silk industries in France during his time. But he also developed vaccines against anthrax and rabies, and he is, somebody that I think was a good example of, history past that would be a bridge between both science and the physical lab and the science of the spiritual lab. He always said, without laboratories, men of silence are soldiers without arms. Or he also said, the more I study nature, the more I stand amazed at the work of the Creator. Science brings men nearer to God, whatever God is for you. And that's the spiritual, aspects of that. So today we're talking about science, all the scientific things that are taking place right now, the history that's being made, spirituality, and how that's going to open up. And the reason it's going to open up at a greater level, whether it's psychic or mediumship, if you go back and if you look at our history, the one thing that's kind of, been in my mind when it comes to being a student of history and writing papers for the work that I do is you'll find that after great events, whether it's a pandemic or a war, there's a huge explosion in intuitiveness, the awakening, psychic sciences, mediumship. For example, after our first Civil War here in the United States, many people after 1865 and the Civil War ended and the country became one again, many people, due to great loss, started to seek out, including President Abraham Lincoln, who brought a medium into the White House, started to seek out mediums and people with intuitive psychic abilities because they didn't get a chance to say goodbye. And the explosion in mediumship in the late 1800s into the early 1900s gave rise to many foundations that are still here today. For example, some that I'm actually associated with, I'm a member of, the Society for Psychic Research, or what we call SPR. It's a nonprofit organization in the United Kingdom, and its real purpose gave rise after the Civil War, going back even before pre-Civil War, but it was, it led to a conference in January of 1882. So this is just about 20 years after the Civil War, because the Civil War ended in 1865. But again, people became this mass consciousness, this mass thought. And Dr. Wayne Dyer talks about that in a real great book called Real Magic, about how mass consciousness or mass thought leads to this phase transition where, things become popular. That's why we have trends and, fads and things come back. And many people started to really ask questions of what is paranormal? What is psychic? Without having the religious fear of being prosecuted or burned at the stake or hung, like we saw in the 1600s. But it describes itself, the SPR in the United Kingdom, it describes itself as the first society to conduct organized scholarly research into human experiences that challenge contemporary scientific models. It does not, however, since its inception in 1882, hold any corporate opinions. And SPR members are to assert a variety of beliefs with regard to the nature of the phenomenon studied. So that's one example, SPR. I look at them all the time and I try to understand, when I'm having something that's either scientific or spiritual, or maybe it's a combination of both. Like I always say, we're somewhere in between all of this. The other institute that I look at is the Woodbridge Institute, which is in Arizona. They do a really good job of studying, their history is based on the study of death, dying, and what comes next. I believe they're in Tucson, Arizona. I have to look at that, but I believe they're in Tucson. They're definitely in Arizona, and they're a 501c, so they're nonprofit as well. But they really are exploring, research in mediums and, what is this psychic phenomenon and how much, truth, the studying of death and dying and what comes next, that's important. And that comes, and that's built upon the foundations of things after great tragedies like wars and pandemics. And we're even seeing right now with this pandemic that is going to be with us for a while. This isn't going away because there's no cure for COVID-19. We're learning how to work with nature, and it comes from nature. COVID comes from the animal kingdom. These mRNAs that have been in studies and these vaccinations for years, since the first bird flu broke out over a decade ago. So we're looking at the DNA from nature. So it's interesting of our connection to nature, which would be both scientific and spiritual. And as we move forward with this pandemic and the amount of loss of life, I don't know what it is currently. When I last checked, it was close to 4 million globally and 600,000 plus people here in the United States. Those are people, and those people have families, and they have, connections and a network and a ripple effect. That's a lot of ripples that are going out physically into the world, both scientifically and spiritually. And, it's literally going to drive people to ask bigger questions after, this calms down a little bit. But, curiosity is also the mother of science, and wonder is the mother of spirituality. That's a big part of this journey, and we're going to see an explosion during our Roaring 20s, both of science, technology, spirituality, but it's also going to have this blend, what we call synergy. What is synergy? And the definition of synergy, and I use synergy a lot, which is part of the metaphysical study. Metaphysical mean meta material, physical being of this world, so of mind and of body. But the definition of synergy is the interaction of or cooperation of two or more organizations, substances, or other agents to produce a combined effect greater than the sum of their separate effects. So, for example, the synergy between artist and a record company. When an artist is either drawing or singing, they have a synergy connection to be recorded and to put that out there. So synergy is literally an organization, a blending of substances, whether it's in the physical, whether it's the mental, of thought, and it's to produce a combined effect greater than the sum of their separate effects. So when I do a reading, mediumship or psychic, it's literally using synergy to make that combination. Now, with that, the balance of what Einstein talked about, that intuitive gift, right? And I'll say it again here about intuition is the intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is its faithful servant. This is where we start to give rise to what today we would call skepticism, and we see a lot of skepticism in the world. And what is skepticism? By definition, it's a skeptical attitude, which is doubt as to the truth of something. So, for example, somebody would say, what I'm saying, even with this radio show, somebody could listen to this radio show or podcast and have a skeptic mindset, which, is healthy, but they could literally be skeptical to what I'm saying and say, that guy on that show, Inspired Living Radio, I'm just skeptical to what he's saying. That is us as humans. That is part of the process. And so I would challenge you, when you have a skeptic mindset, I go with a paramount foundation of trust and time, because you have to have trust. You have to have a little bit of belief in the magic to see it and to feel it and to witness it. But I always say, ask, believe, receive, and perceive. And what I mean by that is ask the spirit, ask the universe, ask whatever your belief system is, whether it's God or whether you want to connect to a loved one who's passed on from this horrible pandemic of COVID-19 and all the politics that's been associated with that. And it's really sad because a lot of people did not need to pass from this, but it's been politicized, and public health should never be politicized because it's public health, which means for everyone. It means community. But ask, believe. You got to have some sort of belief in something, because if you go to the root level of that belief is triggered based on that consciousness, that subconscious that I was just talking about. And where do those thoughts come from? So it's at the cellular level, it's at DNA level, it's also at an energetic level. And if you follow Nikola Tesla, who I followed for years and have studied for years, he always said, if you want to unlock the secrets of the universe, you think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration, not something that you're taught in school, not something that you read in a book that happens to be, biblical. It's really unlocking through energy, frequency. Again, frequency is based on what you're vibrating at and how you're seeing, because you're vibrating at a certain frequency, like tuning in radio. But at the same time, that's where you need to have that belief at the cellular level, at the thought level, at the energetic level. So ask, believe, and then you receive that information. Will it happen real time? No, it could come 2 days later. It could come a week later. But because you asked, your intention set energy in motion, and that's some of those hidden, universal laws that we don't see. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. So ask, believe, receive, and that reception can come through, like I said, clairsentience, the ability to use your skin, or I have a beard, so it's like having whiskers of a cat. If you clip the whiskers of a cat, they lose their balance. If I, don't have a beard, I may not be as receptive to receive that information on my skin. So clairsentience, the ability to feel that spirit voice, to feel that connection, to feel that message, or clairvoyance, the ability to see it within your mind without actually having thought behind it. So ask, believe, receive, and then of course, the last part of this is how you're going to perceive what you just received as an antenna in life. That perception, that perspective is also going to include the skeptic mind, the ego mind. It's like a bunch of monkeys running around in our head with all these different, opinions and judgments. And, the best way that I found to turn the skeptic mind off is to name your ego and then tell your ego to shut the F up and go sit outside and not even pay attention to, that voice. I think that's really important for skepticism. Challenge it, of course. I'm not saying, believe everything that you hear. I'm not saying that at all, but, a big part of this journey is to be mindful of the thoughts that are coming into your mind. May your inner voice be the kindest voice you know. And for a lot of you listening out there, I'm sure there's a lot of self-sabotage and a lot of negative self-talks. So really start to change your mindset and, discipline and dedication every day that you're alive to have your inner voice be your kindest voice you know. And if there's something you don't agree with, question it. Ask, believe, receive, and perceive, because we will all be skeptics. Even in just this last month, I did a reading for a young lady live on Facebook Live for my Healing Cafe and Metaphysical Mocha Monday show. And you can go check it out on my page right now. And the connection of the intelligence that came through was just, even to this day, my mind was blown, like, wow, did that really just take place? And it was fun to watch, but it showed me too the power of that skeptic mindset. So when it comes to science, when it comes to spirituality, when it comes to that synergy that connects us at the cellular level, at the thought level, and then of course that connection based on our belief systems and what we've learned, how we were raised, what we were taught, it all really flows together, and it really comes down to, what are you prospecting for? I'll go back to, even Louis Pasteur when he talks about, let me tell you the secret that has led me to my goal. My strength lies solely in my tenacity, and his tenacity to observe, to go into the laboratory, whether it was his physical laboratory for fermentation, which literally, if you learn from history, kept the beer and wine and milk industry alive in France during the time. But then he would also go into his mindsets to the laboratory of his mind to understand some of these bigger questions that we all have. So, it's just something to think about. It's something I thought I'd share with you today. There's a lot going on in our world, like I said, from, the technology, people going into outer space as tourists, unidentified aerial phenomenon, literally now, brought into our reality that there is something out there that defies the laws of gravity and the laws of physics as we understand it today. It defies our technology with this official Pentagon report, which we're going to see the explosion of spiritualism in our roaring 20s because of this pandemic and so much loss that has taken place with this pandemic. And, it's just like if we stay focused, if we're looking, let's say, through a microscope or a telescope, we realized that there were many debates before the telescope, before the microscope. If you didn't see it, it didn't exist. The microscope changed that. We know that there's a world that's fully alive that we don't see with the human eye. Telescope, same thing. Even our smartphones, with the technology we have at our fingertips is just mind-blowing. But we need to stay focused and, in looking into a still point that's lying in front of us, because we all have different perceptions and we all see things differently. But at the end of the day, we sit at the table of life and it's, all connected. It's all symbiotic. We just have a different seat and a different viewpoint. But we still need to, we need to still our mind from the thoughts that can distract us, take us away, take our attention away, and, our attention to that inner gaze. And if we stay focused, looking, like I said, through that microscope or telescope or movie of your mind, just as scientists see the outer stars, we may be able to catch a glimpse of our inner lights and our colors, our inner stars, our moons, our suns, whatever that journey is for you. Scientific pursuits lead us both to the discovery of ways to help the world become a better place, but also to answer some of those burning questions that lie within each of us and to uncover the greatest truths of all time. Why are we here? Who is God? What is God? What is our soul? And what is the purpose and passions of your life here on the planet Earth? So I just want to thank you for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed this show, again, as we discussed science, spiritualism, synergy, and of course the skeptic mindset, which will be with you until the time you transfer over to the other side. And I hope you have a great rest of your week. Thanks for hanging out with us here on Inspired Living Radio. Until our next soul adventure together, be kind, be caring, be compassionate, and most importantly, dare to dream, dare to explore, dare to live, and discover that diamond within. Namaste.